me, a convertible can only be a small and light sports car, something like a Miata for instance, or it can be an opulent Luxo barge without a top, something like a Rolls-Royce drophead coupe or a Bentley Continental convertible. But with the M4 convertible, I feel like BMW has managed to achieve both. This car is really fun and really enjoyable to toss around on a twisty road, even though it weighs over 1.9 tons. But when you're just cruising, its suspension is remarkable. It deals with bumps much better than it has any right to. For me, the comfort was the biggest revelation with the M4 Convertible LCI that I'm driving today. I'm sure the suspension has special tuning for the convertible because, let's face it, the drop top isn't going to be bought by people who want to take it to the track as much as those who would pick the coupe. You can still firm it up at the touch of a button or a screen in this case, or a button and then a screen. And with it in its firmest setting, you can enjoy it on a road like this one, which, as you can see, has a few twists and turns. And even though it's not the smoothest road, and I have the suspension in its firmer setting, I'm not being bounced around or jiggled in my seat. It is firm, there's no escaping it, but it seems amazingly well judged for this kind of car. I've always wondered what attracts people to an M4 convertible, because, as I said at the start of the video, I think convertibles fall into two categories, and this was trying to do both, and I thought, it can't be good, right? But it is. It really is. This car is so impressive, so fun, and I totally get it. I also like the fact that with the latest generation, which in convertible form is called the G83, the coupe is the G82, BMW has gone to a soft top roof. This is apparently around 40% lighter than the hardtop that it used in this car's predecessor. And I also think it looks better. That's not to say that the previous hardtop M4 was a bad looking car, but park it next to a coupe and the latter just looks that little bit better and sportier, I think. Whereas with a soft top, all you want to do is just put the top down and just enjoy the limitless headroom. Even with the lighter roof though, this is around 150 kilograms heavier than the G82 coupe. So that weighs 1775 kilograms, and this is just shy of 2 tons. I actually drove the G82 pre-facelift with rear-wheel drive on this very road in some really rather greasy conditions. And if I'm perfectly honest, it was a bit of a handful to keep on the road. The pre-facelift car in competition guys had 510 horsepower. Now with the LCI, BMW has upgraded it to 530 PS. It still makes the same 650 Newton meters of torque, but it's spread over a wider rev range. But what really impresses me about this car is just how well it puts its power down, especially off the line, where its rear-wheel drive predecessor wasn't the best unless you had bone-dry tarmac on a warm day. Otherwise, the rear would just squander some of the power away, inevitably. I mean, that's fun in its own right, but it doesn't pin you to your seat like this car does. So this car can do 100 kilometers per hour from a standstill in 3.7 seconds, claimed. Launching it, it feels way quicker than that. And some people have tested it with some measuring equipment. It did the sprint in 3.1 seconds, which seems believable considering how brutal this feels. Check it out. That's 100. It feels quicker than some EVs. And this engine, the fantastic S58, in this application doesn't have any electrification, so it's not a mild hybrid. So none of the surge that you feel in this car comes from electric motors. It's all good old-fashioned suck, squeeze, bang, blow, and a lot of suck thanks to the big twin turbo setup that this engine has. I will say that with the top down especially, you do feel some of the structural rigidity go away. Depending on the type of bump that you go over, you might hear the dashboard creaking a little bit, or sometimes there's shake through the steering column and it feels like it's moving from side to side. I got none of that in the hardtop. This still feels rock solid, but not quite as solid as the hardtop, I think. Do you really notice the difference? Well, not really. Especially out on the road, you certainly don't, unless you're going over some bumps. But it doesn't happen over all bumps. And overall, it's very impressive. Being a drop top, it does have extra bracing in the chassis to help counteract this, but there's only so much you can do when you take the roof off a car. But the trade-off is you hear the glorious S58, which is savage. Driving a car equipped with this engine is one of the great automotive experiences of our generation. And you can certainly have some fun on a road like this. The car doesn't really feel like it has all-wheel drive because obviously the all-wheel drive system is heavily rear biased. But coming out of corners, you do feel the rear coming around, and there's plenty of rotation that you can play with on throttle alone. This is one of the great driving experiences that you can have today. Yeah, I know I've said it again, but it just is. And paired with a spectacular road like this, it's just a delight. When you put the dials in sport mode, the head-up display changes to a tachometer, which is right in your line of sight. And while I normally think that HUDs are basically gimmicks, while driving the car on this road and trying to keep my focus on the road, I don't think I've looked at the actual gauge cluster once. The HUD shows you gear, speed, and RPMs. And it has sequential shift lights. The last M car I drove on this road was the M2, which is a bit less powerful. It has 460 horse from the same engine and a bit less weight. Well, it weighs about the same as the M4 coupe for whatever reason, even though it's a smaller car. But for that, you do need your wits about you more. Whereas this, with all-wheel drive, it just grips and goes, and there's a lot less waywardness. That's not to say the M2 is hard to control, because it isn't. For the level of power that it has, and for the kind of car that it is, it's really well judged and quite easy to drive, if I'm honest. Much less lively than its predecessor. And the same goes for the M4. It feels a bit more grown up, but that's not to say it's less fun. The gearbox also responds excellently. It doesn't shift up for you. I like how the back comes around through every corner when you apply throttle. Like with any modern M car, you can configure the handling to your preference. So you have the two M mode buttons, which are basically two individual modes. You can configure them however you please. So you can set the engine in efficient sport or sport plus, chassis in comfort, sport or sport plus, steering in comfort or sport, brake in comfort or sport. You can also disable the all-wheel drive system and just send all of the power to the rear if you want to do crazy skids and whatnot. That's not what we're going to do today. And you can also choose to either have stability on or M dynamic mode or completely off. And between these settings, you can really change how this car feels. You can also adjust the severity of the gear shifts with this rocker switch here on the gear selector. And I like that BMW has tried to mimic a manual shifter when you put it in reverse. So just like in a manual car, you pull it towards you and then up. And to put it in drive, you push it away from you. This is different from the shifter that BMW puts in its regular cars. And it just makes the car feel more special. When you're in automatic mode, the gear shift severity rocker switch also toggles between the mapping for the automatic shifting. So if I put it in its gentlest setting, it will try to go up through the gears like in a more efficient manner, trying to keep the revs down. As you can see, now it's in 5th. But if I toggle the switch, it shifts to 4th. And sometimes it even shifts 2 gears down. And the downshifts are also more aggressive. This gearbox is a highlight. It might be just a regular old torque converter automatic, but BMW has worked some kind of magic with this. And not only do you feel the shifts, but you also hear them. The exhaust has quite a savage bark. I'm not sure how they've been able to achieve it with a particulate filter, which is known to muffle the noise of an engine. I was filming this car in this forest a few hours ago, so I was out of the car and I was with my tripod waiting for it to come into a corner, and just hearing it with the engine sound and the exhaust note echoing through the trees. It's the kind of thing that gives a car nut goosebumps for real. And I can't say I miss the hardtop's extra torsional rigidity and 150 less kilos of weight. Don't really notice it that much. I'm sure that if I start sliding it around, the extra weight will make its presence felt in the form of inertia, and the pendulum motion might be more pronounced because there's extra weight. But you really don't know that you're driving a 1.9 ton plus vehicle. Sadly, like many great things in life, the M4 drop top isn't cheap. It starts at around 106,000 euros here in Romania, and my tester is 126,000 with a few bells and whistles. Nothing game-changing. You can just buy this in standard trim and enjoy it just as much as I am now. I really like the paint job, by the way. So it's a BMW individual color. It's called Velvet Orchid 2, not 1, 2. And I think it really works with this car. I also like the design of the wheels, although I'm not a fan of the diamond cut / two-tone look. You can get them in plain silver, which is what I would do, especially on a convertible, which is supposed to be a bit more classy, I guess, than the coupe. Not so boy racerish. The wheels are staggered, by the way. They are 19s in the front and 20s in the back. And the rear tires are quite wide. They are 295 section. I think this car should have been optioned with the silver wheels, because they would have gone great with the optional chrome surround for the quad exhaust in the back, which I think are an excellent choice for the convertible. And maybe it should have had even more chrome. I think you can totally daily this car if you live somewhere where the weather allows you to have a drop top, because if you put it in its chillest mode, it feels just like a normal car. It's easy to drive. Space in the trunk goes down from 440 liters in the coupe to 380-ish liters in the drop top. And in order to access the full capacity, you need to push this divider up, which you can only do when the top is up also. The steering is light, maybe a bit too light, even with it in sport. I still would have liked a bit more resistance, especially since there isn't that much feel. But again, like all modern BMWs, it more than makes up for it through the precision that it offers. By the way, what do you think? Do you like the pre-facelift or the LCI lights on the M4? I really like these new ones much better. This car also has the optional rear laser lights, which look really, really good. Although at night you don't really see the thin strips of light. You just see the part that lights up in the lower part of the cluster, where it also says BMW laser. And I also think they could have done without the stickers. It doesn't have one, but two stickers warning you that they are laser lights, class 1 laser lights. BMW says that this car should use around 10 liters per 100 kilometers, but let's be realistic. Let's see what I've been averaging. So I've been averaging for the last 350 kilometers, 17.5 liters per 100 kilometers. And I've not been driving it lightly, so even with a heavy right foot, it's not the worst. It's bad. I mean, if you want efficiency, just get a diesel. And BMW makes some really, really good diesels, but they don't sound like this. And they don't tickle your soul in the way that this really, really does. So I'm gonna keep driving this until I run out of fuel. Until the next video, thank you for watching.